Well, welcome back, everyone. I've saved some food for Vinny.
The Neapolitan.
This is his food.
What are they called?
I don't know.
Neapolitan sfogliatelli. So they got ricotta cream in them.
Yeah.
So they're healthy. They're good for you.
They're very good for you.
Well, Vinny's going to take up this conversation now. I'm sure he'll move from the food to some important and interesting life that Arthur's had.
Such a great pleasure to meet you.
Good to see you.
Asked to sit down with you. Look, you know where I come from and my background, and every time someone issues me or gives me an issue to think about, I always think about ulterior motives that people might have. And I want to talk about the current situation with Trump. Now, I know that you, as the US ambassador for Australia, has had many dealings with Biden and Trump. And not that I have anything derogatory to say about either man, but I'm just talking about, in general, the current situation with the war.
Yeah.
We've got Venezuela, which is an oil-producing nation, being knocked off. Now we're looking at Iran being knocked off.
Yep.
Now, the situation with Venezuela was it was a bad government. They were bringing in drugs. With Iran, it's about the radical people that they are. But in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, well, hang on, there's another benefit there, and that is if you get all the oil from Venezuela and from Iran, you become the winner. You become unbeatable because you've got all the energy.
Yeah.
Is that the real reason?
Look, it's one of the reasons. I think control over resources, in particular oil and gas, because when Trump came back into office, he talked about drill, baby, drill.
Yep.
He was very big on continuing to exploit fossil fuels. He was against renewables and alternative energy. And so for him, having the capacity as America to control major sources of oil and gas throughout the world does give him power. It further accretes his power, just as getting power over Panama or Canada or Greenland or any of this. He has a very expansive view about using American power in America's interest. So what's different about Trump from some previous presidents is that some previous presidents put a lot more store by what they called the global rules-based order, which they underpinned and guaranteed, and there was a system of alliances and partnerships that fed off that. Trump is more America first. What our job in countries like Australia is to make sure that that's not America only. And that the alliances and partnerships continue to work to the benefit of us and of them. But it's a more transactional world. It's more openly transactional. It's always been a bit transactional, but with Trump it's even more transactional than before. You've always got to keep reminding them, why is it in his interest to deal with Australia? Not just because we're nice people and we've got sunny beaches, but what is the strategic and other reasons? So we've just got to be realistic about what it is we want out of the US, particularly in our part of the world, and how does that relate to what they are interested in. But your central thesis is right. It's all about the projection of power by Trump in America's interest. And in some ways he takes quite an old-fashioned view of power, which is using hard power rather than soft power or diplomacy. He believes at the end of the day, you use power, their hearts and minds will follow, right?
Well, look,
and there are other expressions that go with that. But and so that is part of it. It is also true to say that Iran has been an issue, an irritant, a force to be reckoned with going back a long way, because they projected their power to destabilise the Middle East and beyond with funding terrorism, including in Australia. They funded terrorist groups in Australia. So they're not model citizens. So when people talk about international law and all the rest of it, I know what they're saying, but the reality is the only sort of language that these people understand is basically the language of the sword.
And we had to stop that nuclear threat, surely.
And the nuclear threat is part of this projection of power by the Iranians. They're trying to do a North Korea. The way North Korea survives is by having nuclear weapons and saying, if you come after us, we're like the hedgehog. We'll just curl up and we'll make it really painful for you. And by the way, we might bomb you with a couple of intercontinental ballistic missiles. Now, we don't know the full extent of what North Korea's got, but the sort of ultimate Iranian regime dream would be to have that similar capability. So part of when Trump talks about boots on the ground, part of it is not a ground invasion, but special forces going into either secure nuclear sites, or there's a big island, Karg Island, which is the oil export terminal for Iran. If the US occupies that and controls that, it controls the exit of Iranian oil to the world. And so there's a real debate at the moment about whether there is a takeover of Karg Island. And that would give Trump a lot of leverage over any regime. Now, Trump has said he's interested in regime change, but he's not saying, I will then come in and engineer change on the ground. He's prepared to use his air force and everything else, but he's not going to put a massive force on the ground like we did in Afghanistan or Iraq. What he's going to do is he's going to do more tactical and surgical operations. That's what we're waiting to see now. But he does want to finish this quickly. That's why he keeps saying that we're almost there, we've won, we've pulverized their navy, their air force and everything else, because he doesn't want to get bogged down for months and months or longer in Iran the way Bush got bogged down in Afghanistan and Obama really and Trump won and Biden. He doesn't want to get sort of bogged down because he's got elections coming up in a few months, the midterm elections. And one of his campaign promises to his base was no more foreign wars, no more forever wars, he calls it. So he can't afford to look as if he's focused on that. He's bogged down on that, and he's not dealing with affordability, cost of living, housing, and all the other issues in the US, because at the moment his ratings around the economy, housing, immigration are underwater.
Yeah.
And so it's a bit like what's happening here. People are saying, look, we want the focus on the bread and butter issues. So these special elections last year in the US, where the Democrats won across the board, even though everyone's saying that the Democrats are disorganized and got their tails between their legs, they won because they focus very much on cost of living. And even Mamdani, the socialist who won in New York, he won 62% of young men under 35 and 82% of young women under 35. Now, he's a socialist, not because they all became socialists, but he was promising more affordable housing, cost of living. Now, some of his policy nostrums are probably not going to work, but people were desperate for new outcomes.
They look close.
And what we've seen in the last 3 or 4 or 5 elections in the US, there's been a lot of volatility and change because the indicators have been that the country, people think, is going in the wrong direction. Every time that's been the case, they voted for a change of administration. And that's the challenge Trump faces.
And is immigration a big...
Well, look, immigration was a big positive for him, but the way it's been carried out in the US, where it looked a bit like they weren't just grabbing criminal illegals, they were grabbing other illegals who hadn't broken the law. They were picking up some American citizens, and they even picked up the odd Native American who was saying, well, look, hang on, I don't have another country to go to. I was sort of like, I'm native here. So that's the way ICE, as they're called, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, have behaved, has had a bit of a backlash for him, which is why he has now sacked the Homeland Security Secretary, because it was just going too hard. Now, he's promised he's not going to sort of let up, but the fact that he sacked her is an indication that he's a good politician like this. I got the message. You think this was all a bit haywire? I've got the message.
Well, it all comes down to systems and their intelligence gathering and who they're targeting. That's what it comes down to. It's not exactly his policy that got it wrong. It's the people actually enforcing that policy.
And this is one of the issue people argue about, is the competence of execution is an issue. And partly it's a function of the fact that there have been a lot of cuts to government in the US, and the danger has been that they've cut not just the fat, but a bit of the muscle. That's the issue. And then you get into, as you know, coordination, the information process.
Very important.
We're going to give Arthur a bit of a break so he can have some of these lovely Nepalese Neapolitan.
Spogliatelli, Napoletano.
Arthur's going to jump in. Vinny will let him have one of those. Arthur will have one. We'll come back in a moment. So please contact us, comment on what you're listening to with Arthur. We'll be back.